Great.
Sorry.
You guys hear me? Small enough group? Cool. Thanks for coming out. I'm going to start by saying, first off, if you guys have any questions at all throughout, we're a small enough group. Raise your hand, shout it out. It's all good. Big thank you to Seth and Teresa and the entire Adorama crew for having me out today. So today I'm going to share with you a quick overview of some of my favorite shots that I've shot over the years. And then we're going to jump into a portrait demo with Justin here. Great model who we're lucky to work with today. And then we're finally going to end with Q&A for any questions left from you guys or the online crowd as well. So the goal of today is to show you examples of how to get the most you possibly can out of one single light source. You don't always need a lot of gear to get the job done. And I hope that this can be a springboard for all of you to start experimenting more with your own lighting. So to start, for the last 10 plus years, I've been working full-time as a portrait photographer here in New York City. I've been incredibly fortunate to work with so many amazing clients like Masterclass, Red Bull, Universal Music Group, the Associated Press, AMC Networks, and so forth. Some of these shoots are really large productions involving lots of pre-production, big crews, and giant studios or sound stages. Lots of others, though, are produced much more simply with either working solely or with one assistant and a really lightweight gear pack. Each type of those shoots has their own challenges, but there's a lot of freedom in working small and being nimble to work quickly with talent in order to create something that looks as elevated as possible. So we're going to start by going through a handful of real-world scenarios that I've shot with one single light source. Here's the great A$AP Rocky. I shot this for Red Bull. This was a quick shoot at a venue in Harlem where we didn't have a lot of space or time for a setup. I knew that he was going to be arriving from the airport. He was flying in from London, and that we needed to grab him before he got to his green room. Otherwise, we weren't going to get him at all. That was just the nature of the task at hand. So we arranged for his publicist to bring him straight to us as soon as he walked in the door. We went with a small light modifier. In this case, it was just a small beauty dish and a Profoto B1 at the time. And we shot a couple of setups in about 5 minutes. Approaching this shoot with a really small handheld setup enabled us to get a lot more done in a short amount of time than if I were to have a ton of gear. Here's Stephen Daldry. He's a British director and producer of the show Billy Elliot. I also shot this with a beauty dish. We were working in a Broadway rehearsal space, and this entire wall was mirrors, which is kind of a nightmare as a photographer, and reflections, and unless you're leaning into that. But there was this blue curtain on the wall. And I taped a piece of black fabric. In the photo industry, it's called duvetine. It's like a black textured fabric that really soaks up light, but I could have grabbed a black tablecloth, a black t-shirt, whatever. I taped it up in front of that mirror, and I asked Steven to hide behind the curtain and peek through. I added a grid to the beauty dish, which basically created a more dramatic fall off of the light, and really draws the eye into the center of the frame. Legendary producer and band leader Quincy Jones, who I had the honor of spending about 15 minutes with. Rest in peace, Quincy. I shot this for the Associated Press. This was shot with a medium octabank to camera right. So one quick note about photos that I've shot for the Associated Press, the New York Times, and some other editorial outlets. I'm allowed to retouch images for my own purposes, but nothing that I submit that gets syndicated all over the world is allowed to be retouched whatsoever because of their really strict journalistic integrity guidelines. It's the same with National Geographic and several other publications. So in other words, the photo has to be pretty damn good right out of camera. I'm able to make minor adjustments like, brightness, contrast, color temperature, but I can't retouch any skin. I can't take anything out of the background that might be there. So I need to be really conscious of the light modifiers that I'm using and know who might look better with a particular type of light. All of these considerations have definitely forced me to work on the fly and certainly to become a better photographer over the years. Here's Mick Jenkins. I shot this at Bowery Ballroom in Manhattan for Red Bull. I shot this with a medium strip bank, like a 1x3 foot strip bank, oriented horizontally just to light his face. There was this amazing late afternoon sunlight blasting through the window behind him, and using a strip bank enabled me to control the light in a really specific way without throwing light all over the face. All over the place, rather. Here's a favorite of mine that I shot of David Byrne. I shot this in his studio in Soho. David is a true icon of the music industry. And I did a lot of research to know what I was going to be getting into for this shoot. Yep.
You already have a question.
Question.
So you said there's no retouching, but is dodging and burning allowed?
Dodging and burning is allowed, yes. That's a good question. Somebody had asked if dodging and burning is allowed when I shoot for those publications. And yes, that's fine. Essentially anything that you could do back in the day in a classic traditional darkroom, you're able to do. So I did my research on David Byrne, and I knew that I wanted to lean into something a little bit weird. And I brought this mannequin arm with me, and I sold David on the idea. There's my assistant standing in before the shoot. And that was the entirety of our setup, right? It was one 5-foot Octabank, a backdrop similar to the one that I have with us here today. And that was it. Dominique Ansel, the French pastry chef and creator of the Cronut. This was shot with a medium Octabank to camera right. Pusha T, I shot this backstage in LA with one strip bank and a grid. Again, just right in front of him, just one small strip. Using this type of light gave me a lot of control to specifically light one area of the frame while keeping drama in the rest of the frame. Misty Copeland, I shot this with a medium Octabank to camera left. Thriller author David Baldacci, I shot this for Masterclass in Washington, D.C. The lights on this film set that I was shooting on were overhead and really dramatic, but really cool. I placed a strip bank just out of frame to camera left, just to light his face without sort of spoiling the drama of the rest of the scene. Kendrick Lamar, I shot this at the Dream Hotel downtown in Manhattan. It was like the junior presidential suite. I was tasked to basically spend a day with him for the client, the release of a product, and essentially photograph sort of behind the scenes while he was being interviewed by press that was flying in all over the world to interview him at this suite. I really wanted to get a portrait with him. They had already shot the main campaign, but I pushed and pushed, and like the day before the shoot, they finally kind of caved and were like, sure, you can do like a 2 to 4 minute portrait of him if he's willing. And it was like 15 degrees outside. It was a December or January. This is the balcony of the suite. There's a hot tub right behind us. And he was so cool. I spent the entire day with him. But you know, I talked him out there, and it was overcast and it was really cold. We weren't gonna spend a lot of time out there. All he needed to do in an overcast day was just give a little pop of light in his face. In this case, I used a beauty dish as well, but it wasn't really about, oh, I'm using a beauty dish for this specific look. Sometimes the modifier isn't really just about the quality of light. In this case, it was a really windy day, and I knew that a softbox or an umbrella would be a real pain in the butt to control, especially with a small crew. Safety has to always be top of mind on any set, especially with celebrities. So I went with the safest option that I knew wasn't gonna blow over with one assistant holding it, and you know, something that would still give me the desired result that I was going after. This was a personal shoot in my studio in Brooklyn. This frame was lit with one flash through a narrow beam reflector, essentially a long reflector that really collimates the light in a really direct way. And then I put up some flags, basically like a big black piece of fabric on a rectangular frame, 2 of those, and shot the light from far away, and it basically cast these triangular shadows. Here's Bob Odenkirk. Photographed on the street just outside of his apartment in Manhattan. It might look like a studio setup, and it is, but that was the entirety of the setup. Literally taped a piece of black and a piece of white seamless paper to the side of a bodega because we had to shoot outside. It was this or a park that had this dappled light, and we were shooting at like 12 noon or something like that, which is never an ideal time to shoot on a bright sunny day. This was my assistant Andrew hand holding a light, just overpowering the midday sun. What was cool about this setup was I was able to have both kind of a high key white setup, a really dramatic black setup, and I can also have them stand in between and have kind of a mix of those two. So, but just a really quick, gritty way to get something that like if you took a guess, you'd say that that was done in a studio, but it's cool to be able to do something like that on the street. I really love playing with color and motion whenever I have the opportunity. This frame in particular was shot with a single light again into a softbox, but I had the modeling light turned on. And I dragged the shutter. In other words, I shot with a really low shutter speed, something like a 1 second exposure, and basically held the camera. I don't recall whether I was handheld or on a tripod, but basically had my talent just move. So at the start of the exposure, I'm like, okay, action, and he moved to his final place. And that modeling light gives that little drag, that little motion blur there in the shadows. Here's Alicia Keys. I shot this on the rooftop of her recording studio in Soho. Shot this in 2020, which was really difficult time to be on big productions. It was a big film production for Masterclass. I really pushed to get Alicia outside on the rooftop for dusk and managed to get there. I had a platform set up with her or for her, had the skyline right behind her. And I also had, you can see that white tent back there. That was a daylight studio that I had set up because we were doing various setups with her on the roof. But managed to shoot her against the skyline, and that ended up becoming a billboard campaign. This was on the Sunset Strip in LA. Yahya Abdul-Mateen, also shot in 2020. Because of COVID, we needed to shoot outdoors and really close to his home. I think he was just wrapping up a production for a film he was working on, but nonetheless, like, the last thing I want to do is get an A-list actor sick, right? So everybody's safety is top of mind in those situations. We scouted the surrounding blocks around his apartment, and I ended up taping a background to a closed storefront literally across the street from his apartment. And that is a light shaper that we're going to be using today that I have with us here. Here's Gino Auriemma, the UConn women's basketball coach. Shot this on a soundstage just outside of Boston. This frame and this frame were both shot with the same one light setup. The only difference is I had the talent move just a foot here or there. So those two frames were shot with this setup. It's one hard light shot between two V-flats. It could also be two black curtains. It could be anything that lets you control the light in sort of a column type of situation. And that created that hard line of light right there, as well as this shadow. There was also this amazing vintage light in the studio, and I had to use it. It really caught my eye. The sheer scale and beautiful quality of the light really drew me in, so we decided to set it up, and I shot this frame. Here's George Stephanopoulos. I shot this here in Manhattan. I'd planned on using warm window light, but by the time we got the talent onto our set, the light was, of course, gone. Story of our lives. So I used one hard light with barn doors and a warm gel in it to emulate that feeling of warm late afternoon daylight, and I shot this. I really try to get as much out of a shoot as I can, as you probably saw earlier with Bob Odenkirk on the street. So you'll often see me using two different setups, or as many as I can in one small space, like you can see here with Carlos Santana. So that setup resulted in this frame and this frame in a matter of just a couple of short minutes. Everyone keeping up? Any questions so far? Y'all doing well? Cool. All right. Here's Sam Hugan and Catriona Balfe from the show Outlander. This was shot in the tiniest of hotel rooms you've ever seen. Here's Sam solo leaning into a tabletop that I brought with me that I put a piece of white plexiglass on. Might look like a production, but it's really simple. Here's Catriona solo, and all three of these setups were shot in this tiny little space. I had one large umbrella, which I also have with me today, and I rotated that umbrella for each of the two setups just to maximize the amount of space that we had to work with. Here's RuPaul. He's standing inside of a V-flat. A V-flat is essentially, we have one over here. See if I can grab it out. Maybe, maybe not. We're gonna leave that right there. But a V-flat is essentially two large pieces of foam core. You can buy them in any art supply store. You know, the thicker the better for stability, but these are 4x8 feet pieces of foam core. One side is white, one side is black, and you tape them in the middle. So this is literally RuPaul. I have the V-flat set up like so. RuPaul is standing inside of said V-flat. My assistant is holding this umbrella overhead of him. And you can see that catch light if you look in the top of his eyes. That's just one umbrella. It's lit so richly and beautifully, A, because it's a really nice light source, but B, because he's surrounded by this white V-flat. So light is kind of bouncing around and filling in everywhere. So it ends up being a really beautiful, flattering light. Here's actor Joshua Boone. I shot this in my studio with a 3-foot Octabank. Hassan Minaj shot this for an ad with one large umbrella. Simone Ashley from Bridgerton. I shot this in a hotel room with one beauty dish. Richard Branson, I shot this on his island in the Caribbean with one medium umbrella. Dua Lipa, this was at a high school for the performing arts in Manhattan. A few days before her last album release, Dua and Drew Barrymore were scheduled to do a sit-down talk about her new album. I was asked to shoot the two of them together as well as solo portraits. I wanted to lean into the look of the high school, so I scouted this hallway that had these blue lockers that were really classic and timeless to me. This was shot with one single flash through a magnum reflector, which really throws light a long way. I gelled it warm with an orange gel, and I shot it through the window of a classroom door back into the hallway. So I set up the light in a classroom, shot it through that little strip window on a classroom door back towards the lockers, which created this really dramatic sunset look. I also had a large umbrella with me, and I used it to shoot this of Drew standing in the hallway. The entire shoot, to give you some perspective on how some of these celebrity shoots go, the entire shoot was 8 minutes, and I was given 2 minutes with Dua. So like you gotta, it's go time when it's go time, and there's no messing around. So you gotta know what you're doing and have a pretty good plan and backups and make it work. The highlight of this day was introducing myself to Drew. She asked if I was a birth certificate Drew, and when I told her that I was, she gave me the biggest hug, and it was great.
So Joe McNally's in the chat, and Joe's saying, I think working with me has scared Drew that he resolutely only uses one light.
That's true. For those of you familiar with the amazing Joe McNally, I was his assistant for quite a number of years, and Joe is joining us in the chat today. Thank you, Joe. Oh man. I'm going to end here with a shoot that I had with world-renowned cellist Yo-Yo Ma. When we were wrapping the shoot, I asked Yo-Yo if I could step in for a quick photo with him, and he told me to hold his cello. I'm sure you can imagine the look on my face, realizing that he was handing me a priceless Stradivarius from like the 1700s. Incredible moments like these really do stick with me and certainly are not something to be taken for granted. To me, photography isn't about the lighting, the technical know-how, the shutter speed. At the end of the day, it's really about human connection. It's about being let into the doorway of someone's life who I wouldn't otherwise get to meet and hopefully create something magical with them. In order to get to that place though, there's obviously a lot of technical know-how that you need to have, and I'm here to share some of that insight with you today. We're here to talk about lighting, and with that said, we're gonna take a second to get set up and jump into a quick demo. Before we do that, any questions from the audience or online? Everyone following along?
So someone's asking you, how do you get that blue ring light, that blue light right there?
The blue light, this was shot with this blue light reflection. This was a 2-light setup. I know everything else today was 1 light.
Oh.
That's why I didn't show the photo that we shot of Yo-Yo here.
We only book lies here. I don't know.
But this was a hot light, which is called a Lico. This was a hot light that has basically, it's like a theatrical light that they'll use for like a follow spot on stage, or back there on the floor, you can see there's a pattern on the floor over there. That's essentially one of these hard lights with a go-between optic. It's essentially a little thing that they make, little shapes and stuff you can put in there. So this is a Lico, which is a hot light that I have, dialed into a little spotlight type of feel. So that's what's providing that white light sort of spotlight. And then I had a large octa with a cool gel in it, a blue gel, which is just filling in the shadows a little bit. Because what I've found with experimenting with this type of spotlight effect is that if I don't add something like that, it can feel a little bit like a comedy stage. Something like it can just be very much like this is a spotlight, this is the person, and like they're there performing, which of course Yo-Yo is a performer, but I wanted to fill it in just with something to add a little bit of detail into those shadows. But one of my favorite on-set photos. So yeah, pretty special moment. There's my info. Feel free to check out my website, Instagram, all that stuff. But now, Justin, how are you? Everyone give Justin a round of applause. We are going to jump into a demo. So today we're just gonna use 1 light. That's what we're here to talk about, right? Are any of you familiar with umbrellas? Okay. So this is an umbrella. This in particular is a Pro Photo umbrella, but this is essentially a medium-sized umbrella. It's a great light source because it's really lightweight. It packs down really small. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And if I'm working by myself, it's just really easy to control. I have a sock over this umbrella. So there's different variations of umbrellas. There's shoot-through umbrellas that can be essentially a diffusion fabric that the flash is firing through. There are silver umbrellas. There are white umbrellas. In this case, this is a white umbrella inside. I'm just going to take this off. This is a white umbrella inside, and it's an indirect umbrella. So the light fires into this and then comes back. So what that does, the light fires back this direction, sort of hits this white. I call it like it marinades the light, but basically it hits this. The size of this light is really small, and therefore it's going to be predictably really hard. So when the light hits this, it bounces around here and creates a really soft, beautiful light. But what I like to do is go for a classic, even softer look, and I put this sock over it, which is like a one-stop diffusion, which makes it even softer. This is Pro Photo, as I said, but there's lots of different brands that make a similar product. This is a fun little trick. If you guys ever buy any of these sorts of umbrellas, put this diffuser on while the umbrella is closed. And it's way easier to do that way than trying to stretch it out around after the fact. So cool thing about this, as I said, is it's a really flattering light. If there's a downside to umbrellas compared to, say, a softbox or a Magnum reflector or a beauty dish, something like that, it's that umbrellas aren't as rigid and don't do as well, say, out in the wind or something like that. So if I'm working outside, I'm probably going to use a softbox for that reason, unless it's a really calm day. Also, generally speaking, softboxes have an edge to them. Don't think we have any around here, but, well, here's a softbox. Yeah. A softbox has this little edge, which doesn't look like much, but the fact that the front panel is recessed gives you a little bit more control. So if I were to turn this away, you do have a little bit more of an extreme fall off. So umbrellas can be a little bit tough to control. They can kind of go everywhere, but we're gonna play with that and see how we do. So lighting is entirely situational. You never completely know what you're getting into. We've never worked together. I don't know how you're gonna look. I'm sure you're gonna look great.
I hope.
I hope too. but you never know, right? It's like you don't know. You put up one light source and you don't know how that's going to look with somebody's face. So we have this umbrella with us, and I have a much larger one with us as well. We're gonna start here. Where does anybody want to start? Where would you like me to put the umbrella? Any guesses? Where would you start with it? Anyone wanna give an opinion?
You guys can all take seats too, or take chairs if you want. You don't got to be weirdos back there. Right?
What are you gonna say, sir? Diagonal? Sure. How far away do you think? All right, so that's a good inclination. Let's start there. This is called a C-stand for those of you who may or may not be familiar with it. The cool thing about a C-stand compared to a normal light stand, A, they're a lot more durable. B, if you buy a C-stand, it generally has this arm, which lets you get the light out in certain ways, which is much more beneficial than just having a straight stand where you cannot do any of this. They're very heavy. C-stands are, what does a C-stand weigh? 30 pounds, 40 pounds?
Yes.
30 pounds? I don't know. No. They're not light. But if you're putting a light that can cost several $1,000s on a stand, it's probably best if it doesn't fall over. So like invest in proper stands. Buy something that is a little bit weighty. Also, if I was out in the field, I always have sand with me, sandbags. And we have a whole pile right here. Sand is your friend. The last thing that we want is for a light to go down and break or a light to fall on talent. Never a good day. I had one experience a very long time ago where things could have gone very badly, and I had two famous dogs on my set, and I had an assistant who let go of a C-stand without properly bagging it, and a light just like this fell just a couple of feet from two well-known dogs. And that could have been a horrible day for me. Luckily it wasn't, and all was fine, but here we are. So lesson learned, bag your lights.
That might have tools in it, actually.
What's up?
There's probably tools in that one.
Oh.
It sounds like metal.
Oh.
Metal sand.
Interesting.
It just has to be weight. If you're out there, you can take blank sandbags and fill them with water bottles you get from a bodega. Just make sure you have something that can hold weight to put weight in.
So, sir, what was your name? You were saying about a meter away, right? What was your name? Jules. Cool. Nice to meet you. So, a meter away, and you were saying what? Kind of striking across his face a little bit, something like that. All right, let's start there. Let me get this up. Just gonna get this with no light. 1 second. I guess so. Just a second.
We'll get there, Drew. We'll get there.
While he's doing that, you guys in the chat, there's like 150 and only 40 likes. What are you doing? This guy's tap dancing for you. He feeds his kids on likes.
Wow.
No kids? No kids? And hit subscribe.
Cool. Actually, I'm gonna have you scoot this way for me. I'm actually gonna rotate this whole thing like right there. One thing I always do whenever I'm setting up a light, I don't just set it up and then take a photo. Generally speaking, I try to go towards the talent and get a sense of the direction of the light, how it's angled, how it's pitched, all that stuff. This is pitched a little bit too far down, I think. I'm gonna bring that up a little bit and raise it up a touch. And we're gonna start there. When I'm working in a studio environment like this, I'm not blending in ambient light. There's really nothing in this beautiful environment that I want in my exposure. So I'm at ISO 100 right now, f5.6 at 1/25th of a second, which with no flash gives me predictably a black frame. There's nothing there. And what that enables me to do in a studio environment is sort of build up the exposure with flash. So the only thing that is influencing the exposure whatsoever is whatever's coming out of this light. Just gonna skew this a tiny bit. We're at 6.5. We'll see what that looks like. Have you rotate a little bit that way. Turn for me a little bit. All right. Not a bad starting place. I'm just going to adjust my white balance real fast. 1 second. There we go. I'm shooting with a Fuji GFX 100S. This is a 45 to 100 lens. It's a medium format system, which is my go-to for my portrait work. 45 to 100 is if you went to 35, it's something like a 24 to 70-ish, something like that. This radio is a Profoto Air Remote, and this is a Profoto monolight as well, B30. That's not a bad start. What do you guys think of that? Little yellow, a little warm, but actually like pretty nice start. So we're gonna do one more and just get this white balance right. That's great. Cool, a little bit cooler. All right, we're done. No, that's not bad at all. What do you guys think of that? Any inclinations there? Anything that you guys would like to see different? We can go any direction with this. I mean, for his face, that actually is, it's pretty like brooding actor portrait. It's pretty cool.
I'm known to be a broody actor.
There you go. I'm gonna come in closer just to see. How much more kind of rich we can get this light.
Drew, what are you looking for when you do stuff like this?
Good question, Andrew. I'm looking for, the question was, what am I looking for in this type of scenario? So it's interesting. If I'm shooting for a client, there's of course a certain directive there. There's, say, mood boards. There's things that we've dreamt up before the shoot that I'm trying to achieve. In this situation, we're kind of just playing with light. So what am I going for here? Right now, I actually like that very first exposure. I'm pretty happy with that. There's not a whole lot that I would change there. And I didn't actually test any frames with him beforehand. I turned on the light. I knew the exposure that I wanted in this room from shooting a blank frame earlier, but like this is the first frame that we've shot of him. And if anything there, I would say you could maybe say that it's a little bit too shadowy, or that there's not a lot that I would change about it. I know we're here to learn and to move forward, so we're going to try a handful of different scenarios. But I just want to give you all a sense of the different possibilities you can get out of a single light.
So someone's asking, how much is it the light and how much is it the pose?
Good question. How much is, wait, what was it? How much?
They're basically asking how much of your shots are the pose and how much is the light.
Depends on who you're working with in terms of, yeah, posing versus lighting. Both are important. Today we're here talking about lighting more than anything. That's what this particular presentation is about. But it really comes down to, at a certain point in your career, getting to a place where the lighting almost becomes secondary, right? You know what you need to do, and then the technical stuff kind of takes the back seat. You get that set up, and then it's like you actually get to dive in with the talent and like create something together. And that's when you get to the place that you're moving beyond like a headshot or beyond something that is just very surface level. So it's a mix of those. And also in terms of posing, it really depends on who you're working with. You're great right off the bat. Not everybody is comfortable being in front of a camera. I've photographed many, a CEO and corporate exec who you really have to kind of like push and coach along the way. But Alicia Keys, like, kind of like, what am I going to tell her to do? Like she looked incredible. She showed up and had like all the magic right there. And in that case, it's like, all right, move a little bit this way or that way, but she just like looked so good because she had it, right? So it just really depends on who you're working with. Of course, folks who are used to being in front of the camera are easier in a certain way, because they're just more natural, but it's also more difficult to get something different out of them because they've done it so much. So they each have their own challenges, but yeah.
So
Yep.
Someone's asking, would you consider a reflector to be a second light?
Would I consider a reflector to be a second light? So that's a good question. One thing that we could do if we didn't like those shadows was, say, bring in a reflector over here on the shadow side. If we wanted to. It's a passive light. If I were to consider it a second light, it's a passive light. In other words, yeah, this is silver and white piece of foam core. This is the same material that a V-flat that I was talking about earlier is made of. This is a passive light source, if you want to call this a light source. In other words, the only thing that I can't dial up and down the power with this, I can move it closer and further away, which is going to make it more powerful. But that's about it. It's the power of this is entirely dependent upon the power of the actual light that we're using. So that's a good idea, though. Why don't we see what this looks like? So let's turn that way a little bit.
Back here.
Yeah, let's see. Would somebody mind holding a reflector for me? You wouldn't mind. Yeah, same thing. We're gonna bring this like right over here. Flatten that out a little bit, and let's come in a little bit tighter right there. Perfect. Let's see how that changes things up. Quite a bit different, right? Quite a bit different. So if we look at those two, why am I not able to go back here? I feel like I'm freezing up.
Man.
Nope. Uh-oh. I'm frozen. Hang on one second. We are going to restart capture real fast.
You can chill out.
Yeah.
You guys can clap for her though. She did a great job holding that film for her.
Fantastic. Thank you. Let's try this again. Okay. So pretty big difference between those two frames, yeah. The exposure is exactly the same. That is without the reflector. That's with. I think two things are happening here. One, that reflector is filling that shadow side of the face significantly. But you also notice on the highlight side of his face, compared to that, it's significantly brighter. You all see that? So I didn't change anything in my camera settings. What I believe is actually happening is the reflector is not only filling the shadow side, but it's also bouncing back off of this and then to the front side of his face. So it's inherently kind of killing the drama that we had in the first place. You could say you like this, you could say you don't like it. It's all subjective, right? My personal preference is kind of back towards the first frame, if I'm being completely honest. It's maybe a little bit dark, but this kind of like it loses a lot of feeling to me. I also tend to light a little bit darker, I would say, but I think we can find somewhere between those two frames that could work well. What I'm going to do, I'm going to bring this in a little bit tighter.
Sweet.
And we're going to come overhead and see how that changes things up. Nice. The cool thing about an umbrella is, generally speaking, it's one of the first light shapers that most photographers buy. It tends to be a fairly inexpensive light shaper compared to lots of bigger soft boxes and reflectors, things of that sort. So it's a good starting place. So I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to start with this today. And it's something that comes with me on every shoot, and more often than not, I end up using. Actually, can I have you stand up
Let's do it.
for a couple? Let's get this guy out here.
Yeah. School portrait.
Try this, just watch here. Off there.
Not the money maker.
Cool, let's try this. Actually, I'm gonna scoot you out a little bit. A little step forward if you could. Perfect. Nice, chin down a little bit. See how that looks. Very different feel, right? I like that too. I'm gonna make it a touch darker. I'm just gonna dial down like 0.4 of a stop. Actually back up a touch, but somewhere in there. That's quite nice. I'm gonna have you just hold this right under here, right in front of
I'm
you.
doing the work.
Yeah, you are. That's great. Bring your hands in a little bit tighter. So hold them closer. Bring your arms in like here.
Oh, I
So
see.
your arms aren't out of the way.
Nice.
Yep. Perfect. So double duty here, but that's a pretty nice headshot. And pretty simple setup, right? One light with a reflector that my talent is also assisting to make look so good. But that's pretty nice.
What do you think of the necklace? Maybe too attractive.
Yeah, let's put the necklace underneath. That's a good call. Nice. Cool, chin up into that light a little bit. Nice. Once again, just for sake of argument. Actually, let's switch to silver just to show you the difference there. So subtle, but if you look between those two, you can see the silver is predictably a little more kind of glossy, a little bit cooler compared to that. I prefer the white personally, but if you were going for something that was a little more like fashion forward, silver may be the way to go. But pretty simple, pretty quick. Not bad.
What's your white balance? And since you're using Fujifilm, what film simulation are you set to?
I'm on auto white balance and I'm on standard mode. So just essentially, I'm shooting raw right now. Yeah. So I'm not shooting raw plus JPEG. So there's no simulation that you're really seeing on the computer at this point. Let me grab this from you.
Yes, sir.
Do you guys have a preference for the white or the silver? Anyone? White? Cool. All right. Yeah. Have you scoot out for 1 second. We're going to try another thing. So scoot out that way for me. Yeah, I'm just going to move this down.
New IMDb shot.
Cool.
Listen, I love you, Justin. I do. All right. I gave Drew a deer in a cage tonight to shoot with. Okay.
So now I just removed part of the sock off of here to see if we can get a different feel out of this. So I'm going to have you stand right dead center there again.
Right here.
That's perfect. Yep.
Right.
I haven't changed any settings. Just want to see what this looks like. Okay. So the shadow side got quite moody. Yeah, I mean, I could even pull that out a little bit more.
Could be even broodier if you like.
Ooh, yeah, let's do it. Broody works.
Mad.
Cool, I'm just gonna rotate this even a little bit more. In that direction, how you just kind of were. Yep. Same things, just eyes back to me. Yep. So that's quite a bit harder, right? You notice the difference there? It's a little bit harder. If you see there's a little bit more glare on his nose, on his forehead, compared to where we were earlier, which is just classic, super soft. The difference there is I took off the sock of the umbrella. So if you see inside of here, that flash is no longer being diffused by this. It's hitting off the umbrella, but then literally he's getting some hard flash directly towards him. So that's what's creating that, which is also a cool way to be able to use an umbrella like this. So you can kind of get a couple of different looks out of it. If we were to have an umbrella with a silver interior, it would be even much more kind of glossy, brassy of a look. But that's also a cool way to play with that. That looks great on that screen too. Nice. Not bad, not bad. And you also see the shadow in the background there, which we didn't have here at all. But what I did there was essentially I rotated this light away from him. So he's kind of just being lit by this area of the light, and then it's not really lighting that side of the backdrop at all. So let me put this back on and I'll show you.
I don't know what you're brooding about. You're getting free actor shots. Like, don't even start.
I have to really act.
That's great. Seeing how far we can essentially rotate this light while still getting it, you know, as I mentioned, a softbox, you have those edges to it. The light is going to spread that way, but oftentimes the most beautiful part of a light is right at the edge of it. It's away from where the hard head is hitting the softbox. Turn towards that light a little bit. Yep. Cool, that's great. Nice, eyes back to me. That's great. And now it's much more dramatic, right? Where we almost don't even see the background anymore, just a little hint of it. So just by rotating the softbox, I mean, if you look at it, you'd kind of think that it's not even lighting him anymore, but it still clearly is. So another pretty cool way to use it. Where do you guys want to go from here? Any thoughts? You happy with where this is looking? Do you want to try a larger umbrella? See what the difference is? Yeah? Okay, cool.
You guys need to calm down, all of you.
It's hot out today.
I don't want to hear it. No. I don't want
100 degrees here.
We're the ones frying up here. I don't.
This is a much larger umbrella.
We call those a mothership.
Oops, other way. Little unwieldy, but same trick. I put the diffuser on the outside first. And try not to hit anyone. Much larger umbrella.
It's the get out of jail free light.
Mhm.
Just giant, soft point it.
Oops. See if I can actually get this in here. There we go. So the great thing about a small or medium-sized umbrella like I was using earlier is it's great for something like a headshot. If I were to shoot a full body, full-length photo with an umbrella of that size, it's not going to be large enough to light a full-length photo, really. So this is where something larger comes in. You could say this is a little bit overkill, but you saw how small it folds down. It's really lightweight. It weighs a couple of pounds, and something like this is always in my bag as well. I can get by in just about any photo shoot with a small and a large umbrella and a light or two. I certainly am used to going on sets with a lot more gear than that, but when it comes down to it, if I'm working solo or with one assistant, I can get by with a very, very basic lighting setup and really cover all the bases that I need to. Yes.
Flash setting, just a camera around it. Flash setting.
Good question. The question was, do I adjust my flash settings or do I leave that the same and adjust my camera settings?
Yeah.
Depends on the shoot. If I have multiple setups going at one time, so if I say have an actor on a shoot and there's a real big time crunch, I'll basically have different lights for different setups. That way I don't really need to mess with too much along the way. But generally speaking, I'm adjusting my flash settings more than my camera settings. So I know that, okay, for this shoot, I'm gonna be at 125th at f8 at ISO 400, for instance. And I don't need to mess with those buttons and dials as I go from one setup to the next. All I need to do is say, change the flash from 6.5 to 8.5. You know, that makes it much, much easier. So yeah, otherwise it can get pretty confusing, especially when it's a very high pressure situation. Another trick that I always do is Apple boxes. These guys I keep all over my sets, at least one of them, but preferably a couple. And I always have a piece of paper on here. Myself or my assistant has, sometimes I have 4 or 5 different setups and it's like, look 1, look 2, look 3, look 4, look 5. Each of those I have my camera settings and my flash settings written down because it's all planned out ahead of time. That way, if I only have one camera, as I'm walking from one setup to the next, I can see what the next settings are and I'm literally changing it while I'm on the fly. That way, like, talent's walking with me and it's go time as soon as we get there. And I'm not keeping them waiting. So it's a lot of multitasking in a very short amount of time, especially, like, as I mentioned, sometimes it's 2 minutes. I had to shoot with Ed Sheeran once that was like 90 seconds. So these things happen. So yeah, there's not a lot of time to do a lot of change ups. So it's either I stick with something incredibly simple and I have one setup because I know there's no time to mess around, or if I have a few, it's all planned out. Cool. So for this, I'm gonna show just what a straight on look can be here because it's such a giant light source. Such a giant light source that I need to raise it up high enough for me to actually fit in front of it.
Such a giant light source. Everyone online, I'm sorry if I can only get like half a camera angle out of this.
I'm gonna have you lose the denim shirt for this. We'll just stick with black tee.
I don't see the cats I was.
Oh man, no, it's all good.
Okay. Down the wrong tube. take a picture.
We definitely picked the hottest day of the, one of the hottest days of the year to do this. Whew. Happy to be inside. I'm happy we're not doing like a photo walk today.
I'd be glistening.
Oh, this way a little bit. Cool. Just to see how this looks. Same settings here. Oops, did we? That was probably my fault. It's usually my fault. But just, there we go. Cool. Let's try that again. Gonna add a little more power. The light is hitting the back of this umbrella and spreading quite a bit more. It's a much larger light source, so therefore I'm gonna come up like 2 stops in power, see what that looks like. So this can work really well for something that you need to be really beautifully lit in a broader way, a more commercial way. This is the type of light that I may use on, say, a high key white setup, where I want something that's just very clean and commercial. It's not bad here either, but this is, if you remember earlier, I was showing you the Outlander cast. It was Catriona Balfe and Sam. This is the light that I used for that on white, because it's something that I knew would just be flattering and super simple. Come straight on to me. Let's go a little more upbeat for this one, a little less brooding. Nice. You got the brooding face down really well. That's awesome. Cool. It works. It's not what I would necessarily choose for this. You look great, but I prefer more shadowy light for you, to be honest. However, this light, like the other, we can also use in that sort of fashion where I'm going to have you come profile towards this light for me.
I can also smile too.
Let's see. Oh, teeth. Wow. Let's see how this looks. That's a tether cable in front of the lens. Probably going to be a little bright, and it is. We're going to come down a bit. Look at those choppers. Yeah. Cool. And I'm going to meet somewhere in the middle. So that's a really, really beautiful, rich light that is definitely different than back here or when we were back in here. It's much more kind of creamy, if you will. So because it's such a large light source, the fall off from highlight to shadow is much smoother. You can see that. And this really is a game of inches. It's one of those things where I think initially, thinking back a bunch of years when I bought my first softbox, I would indiscriminately put it up 10 feet from somebody and not know the difference, and take a photo and they were lit. I was able to get the exposure right, but it wasn't crafted in any sort of way at all. So the more you do it, the more you learn that, you know, there are a lot of subtleties to the light. I mean, if I were to, this light is, I believe, this is silver on the inside. So this is going to be quite a bit different if we do that same sort of thing. So face that direction again for me, if you could.
What kind of vibe you want?
Let's see.
Zoolander vibe?
we This I'm curious to see. It's actually not that much different. I thought that would be. That surprised me, actually. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. You have a little, perfect. Thank you. I'm gonna pull this back to make sure we get. Mm-hmm. Let's go that way. Actually, maybe take a step back towards the backdrop if you wouldn't mind. And I'm going to move this forward a little bit. It's a large light. It can get in the way. And I'm going to turn it even a little bit more. See if we can get a little bit more of like a hard line on the background. The background kind of goes away there, but it's much harder now because I'm now using essentially just the silver. And that's hitting the backdrop, and the fall off is much more dramatic. Cool. Come forward for me if you don't mind. That's great. Good stuff. Now straight on to me. Good stuff. And just gonna, I accidentally opened up a tiny bit to 4.5, so we're going back to 5.6.
They're asking what color painted backdrop would you recommend?
What color painted backdrop would I recommend? That's entirely dependent upon the shoot and
No, I
your
need an answer.
personal
No.
taste.
No.
I love a classic gray. I love a blue. I love a green. There's a million different colors that you can buy online. There's companies that make hand painted backdrops. It really depends on your personal vision, you know. But that is a good question. Anyone else have any questions? Yes.
I know the one lighting, but
Uh-huh.
if you wanted more texture on the hair,
Yep.
you don't have like the extra light for the grid effect. Is there a way to kind of like make your own grid effect within that one light, or some sort of like?
The question is, this is a one light class, but if I wanted to create sort of a hair light,
Yeah.
how could I go about doing that?
Yeah.
If we wanted, we could, as an option. Would you mind holding this for me? Let's see what we can do.
Ask the question.
I'm gonna, yeah, you.
Participate.
I'm gonna have you face this way. Let's see if we can get a little bit of a hair light. Actually,
Sure.
we're gonna hold that kind of right up here. Come a little bit higher with that. Yep. Let's see if we can get a little glimmer off there. There. Boom. That did change the drama of the front quite a bit, but let's see if we can come down like that. Let's try that again. So it's not like adding a light with a grid or something, but you definitely have a lot more glimmer on the hair than we had earlier. Before, the hair sort of blended into the background a bit. Now it definitely has more of that feeling. So something like a simple reflector could do for sure. I'm sorry.
It could be like a compromise.
Totally. Yeah. Any other questions offhand? Yes, sir. How do I manage glare with glasses? It depends upon the lenses in the glasses. It depends on the size of the light source and the hardness or softness of the light source. So it's generally, and playing with the angle if I didn't already say that. So oftentimes it's literally just having them like chin down. It could be a couple of degrees that gets that glare out of the glasses. It can be bringing the glasses down on the bridge of the nose a tiny bit more. I'm okay. Yeah, I don't think we have time to jump into that now. But and the size of the light source as well. So yeah, angle of incidence, angle of reflection. It can be a challenge. The thicker the lenses, sometimes it can be really challenging, but you work your way through it. Anyone else?
Number when you're doing like a portrait shoot, stable lighting.
Is there, the question is working through the technicalities of your first shoot.
Of a
And-
lighting,
oh.
like using like a remote control or versus lighting.
Are you talking about the light, the power of the light itself?
Yeah.
Good question. Yeah, the question is essentially how to know if there's a particular number setting, like we're at 7.2 right now on this light. That's going to be the right amount of power for like a family portrait shoot. Not an easy answer to that, unfortunately, because every flash system that you use is going to have a different power output. So like this is 500 watt seconds of power. Another unit could be 750 or 1,000. So if you're on 10 out of 10, it's going to be completely different on any of those. So it's if you're doing a shoot in a studio, I would say find out the gear that they have and look online to figure out like what the kind of specs are for that before you go into it. Yeah. Cool. Anyone else? Any questions from online? All right. Thank you all so much for coming out. Appreciate it. Hope you learned something, and thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys.
Wonderful.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to Seth for that very nice series of words that made me super uncomfortable. I don't do well with compliments, but thank you. So today, as Seth mentioned, I kind of want to take you through some of my approaches for how I handle kind of classic portraiture, which doesn't always necessarily need a particularly large space. So I want to kind of take you through what that looks like, how I build that out. Sometimes what I'm working with is very, very minimal gear. Sometimes it's one light, maybe two, or one light and a reflector. Other times I'm able to kind of really cram a lot into a small space. And I want to kind of show you what that brings me in terms of kind of visuals of the image and why I would go through all of the effort if sometimes it becomes quite a bit more complicated and more tight to kind of work in. So why would I even want to go through that effort? I want to show you what that kind of brings to the table. I'm going to be working with a variety of tools today. My camera that I'm going to be using, I'm on the Fuji GFX system, so it's a larger format system. I'll explain what lenses I'm using as I go, but I'm going to give you a full frame equivalent as we go through that, just so you kind of can keep up to that. The lights that I'm mostly going to be using today are the Pro Photo heads. I believe we have the B30s today as our primary lights. So they function pretty similar to, you know, most of the ones in the Pro Photo ecosystem, if you're familiar with it, in the same way as we're going to be using a lot of their modifiers as well. For the background, we've got this is a Westcott pop-up. Manfrotto, thank you. It's just a simple textured backdrop. I oftentimes like to bring in textured backdrops, whether they be something printed like this or a canvas or a muslin, just to kind of break up and give a little bit of texture to the images that I make. But again, it totally depends on what your needs are. I would use this for more of a traditional, kind of that classic portrait setting, or if you want like a headshot, you might be dealing with something a little bit cleaner. I typically gravitate towards something that's got a little bit of feel to it. I love the idea of texture. And so whether it be the background, the clothing they wear, the way that hair gets messy, or the scruff on the face, all those little things I think start to inject a little bit of that that feeling into the image that I'm usually always after, and kind of gets me away from things that feel a little too perfect or pristine, which isn't usually my flavor. I'm going to be tethering into Capture One today. If you're unfamiliar with that as a tether program, that is what we're looking at, as opposed to a Lightroom. And yeah, that's pretty much it. All right. So with that being said, we're going to kind of build these lights in one at a time. I'm going to kind of take you through what I'm thinking about as we do this. Now, the idea of like classic portraiture or timeless portraiture, what I'm talking about when I refer to that are kind of the greats who have established a lot of these really classically, almost like Mount Rushmorean ideas of what the portrait is. We're talking like the Avedons and the Pens. If you think of a white portrait, it's because of Avedon. Not that he necessarily created it, but he was the one who kind of made it that iconic thing. Or the Pen window portrait, or the Pen corner portrait, or the carpet portraits. Pen had several different things that he kind of really defined. Or we look at like the work of Karsh doing that very classic formal style of portraiture. And so for me, a lot of these things are cemented into the DNA of how most people approach portraiture, whether or not they're always consciously thinking about it or not. And so these ideas, like the shooting on a textured background with a big soft light, it's not a new idea. It's been done. And so we kind of want to think about how we can pay respect to those ideas and create it using these newer tools, because we're not using the same things they were using before. One of my favorite types of portraiture is like the classic pen portrait, the window portrait, where you'd have like this really beautiful contrast, that checkerboarding of light, where it'd go like light, dark, and you go kind of explore a lot of his portraits. The Picasso portrait, where it's kind of tucked over and stuff, they all kind of have a very similar structure in that way. And it took me a really long time to kind of really wrap my head around what he was doing. And eventually I learned it was just a window. It was a window, if he wanted the background to look a certain way, he'd angle the background, he'd angle them with the light. It was really kind of simple. He would really modify the window in some pretty unique ways, but it was just this idea of a complex big soft light. And so it's all about kind of paying attention to the finesse. It's paying attention to the really simple ideas we're familiar with and kind of doing something a little more nuanced with it. Now, we're also not using a window. We're not using that dusty, dirty window. So we have to kind of create something that feels like it with more modern tools. So that's what we're going to be doing today. For my main light, we're going to start with something simple here. I've got this B30 head. And how I usually like to configure it is I like to put my A's, or my key light on A. I usually do my fill on B. I usually do a background on C. It's just a normal formula that I always typically gravitate toward. I know some people like to have their different little quirks of that, but that's usually my move. And then I kind of go from there with additional lights. So this is going to be my main light. We're going to call this A. I've already got it set up for A. And I'm going to be using a modeling light here just so that I can help point it a little bit and make my life a little bit easier. We're going to start it over here. Okay. For my main light, I'm looking for just a big soft light source. I am a big fan of the ProPhoto pop-up softboxes. This is a 4-foot octa. I like these just because they're pretty quick to get up and going. Get up and going. Yeah. Those words there. One of the things that I'll also change this out with all the time is like a big umbrella with diffusion. The thing about this is this is going to give me a little bit of a punchier light, something with a little bit more of an edge, a little more shape to it. And I can kind of angle it a little more off the background. Sometimes if I don't want this necessarily to light everything super evenly, this can help me kind of contour the light in a small space a little more effectively. This one's new, it's stuck. There we go. Okay. And there is, making sure there was no grid on that. Cool. So we're going to put the modeling light on so we can see here. Maybe it's bright enough. That's pretty good. Yeah. That's fine. Now, what am I going to set my settings to? Well, my camera has a sync speed of 1/125th, so I'm going to be using that as a shutter speed. I'm going to stick with a relatively low ISO to start, maybe somewhere around 100 or so. For my aperture, this is where I decide what I want this to feel like. Do I want the background totally in focus? Do I want some soft edges? A lot of times in studio, these things don't really matter that much unless I'm really skewing one way or the other. So, you know, you might find that you want to shoot somewhere around a mid-level aperture for something like this, and then it just becomes a matter of getting it approximately there. Other times where maybe I want to introduce a lower aperture because I want it to feel a certain way with those softer edges, I might intentionally aim to go a little softer. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to aim for something relatively soft. Maybe we'll stick around a 4 or so. Oftentimes when I'm dealing with exposure, because I'm thinking about relative power between the different lights in my head, I would say that I more often than not tend to set my lights, especially my main lights, around full stops, just because it makes it easier for me to do the math in my head. So like if I'm putting this at like an F4, for example, and I know that I want my fill light to be 2 stops below, that's an easy thing I can get to in my head, right? So I go, okay, well, this is where I want the fill at 2. So just, it helps me kind of work the math out. Same with like, you know, anything higher or lower. That just, I find to be really, really helpful. So I'm going to set this, guess. What's that? So you don't want me to, you want me to?
Keep blocking.
Well, you know, you said I wasn't going to be a problem. I'm going to move this to the other side because Seth said, don't block the audience.
Would you guys like to not see anything? Is that the goal you would like? Chris, by all means, do the demo.
But I like a left side. I've got a light meter here. I am using the 858. I regularly like to use meters just sometimes for speediness, and also it helps in the demonstration. So I'm using ISO 100, 1/125th. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger this using my my remote.
So you just see them all.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be fine. I want to make this read about 4. It's kind of what I'm going for. Maybe a little over 4, maybe like a 4, 4.5. If I want to slightly overexpose, but we're going to start. That was actually, that was a really good guess.
Oh man, that's within 110.
I got it was a 1 to the. It was purely luck. I'm going to change this to a 4 just so that we're even, and I'm going to kind of show you where that starts. Lens that I'm using here is an 80 millimeter, so full frame equivalent is 70, 68, 72 ish. Sure. I'm going to be at f4, so 1/125th ISO 100 f4, just to kind of show you what this looks like. There's nothing. This is just a straight, flat out light. Okay. Perfect. No, it's like it's exposed, fine, right? It's kind of painting with a big brush, meaning it's lighting him, it's lighting the background, relatively dim, but you're like, it does feel a little darker than you might like it, even though it's there. You're going to get certain variances between lenses with how that aperture maps out. I would probably say more often than not on lighter skin tones, especially when I'm doing kind of a more classic portraiture, I'm more likely to kind of overexpose anywhere between a third and a half of a stop, especially if I'm going to crank the contrast up. Okay, so I put this at 4, like just to kind of prove a point. I'm going to turn it up half a stop, so 0.5. This is not going to look as bright as it seems at being about a half a stop overexposed. Actually, it looks pretty good. And the nice thing about this is when I kind of crank this up in terms of contrast, the skin kind of gets pushed into that brighter tone that I think works in that more kind of classic portraiture, which you get here. You can actually see, even if I push it another half a stop or so, it still works, right? So you can, suppose you can shoot it there as well. I can also turn it up another half a stop, just to get it about where it was. And so even though I metered it at 4 originally, I'm still shooting it at 4. This is overexposed by almost a stop. And you actually see that it looks pretty good. So sometimes the meter is a starting point, but again, depending upon how you're shooting it, the way you're processing it, sometimes you have to kind of be prepared to make those adjustments to exposure to make it render how you want it to be.
Question in the chat. They're saying that they've seen a lot of your work have a lot of negative space on the top of the portrait. They're wondering, when is it best to break the rules effectively for that?
I probably think I break the rule of cutting the top of the head off way more than I do leaving negative space. I got a few images that have negative space, but I love to cut the top of the head off. The reason why I typically do that is because it's a type of shot you see in film. It's the ECU, the extreme close-up, where they pop in and they're going really, really close to the face. So I pop into that every once in a while, and it just puts all the attention on the face and the expression, as opposed to kind of the top of the head, where sometimes there's not a whole lot of interesting stuff happening up there. I think with composition in general, it's always great to learn. It's great to kind of learn the mechanics and the theories and all that kind of stuff that goes into it. But at the end of the day, I think composition really is an extension of balance. And so sometimes balance is the point, other times imbalance is the point. And it really kind of falls on what you want the image to feel like. And if you want the negative space because the weirdness or the sense of rest is what works for you in the image, then I think you can make that thing. But there's no rule. It really is kind of more intuition than anything else. Okay. This is pretty direct, yeah? So it's a relatively dark background, and he's got dark hair and a dark shirt, so you're not getting a ton of separation between the two. We're going to come back to that later. For now, I only want to look at kind of what the main light is doing here. In this small space, the bigger your model, in any space, the larger the light source is relative to the subject, the softer it will be. This is pretty soft, okay? But I can also, because of this edge, taper it off of him a little bit. This is going to lower the exposure a little bit, which I'd probably have to compensate for. But it's going to start to bring a little bit of light off the background, even though he's only, I don't know, maybe 2 feet off the background. This will actually give you even more control. Depends on what's happening over here. In this case, there's not a wall or anything to bounce off of, but you'll actually see that this will change it even more. So you can kind of see the background just in that small space. I lost a little bit of light, yeah? So even if I were to bring that back up a little bit more, you're still going to get a tiny bit of fall off. So you're going to get a better fall off of light there between this and this, right? So that's one simple way to control. A grid would be another way that you can kind of control that too. But I think this is giving me a really nice quality of light on his face. Yeah? There is basically a 3-light setup I use all the time. That is like my de facto standard, which is kind of what I'm showing you here. I've got some kind of a main light, oftentimes umbrella, it's an octabox, something like this. Then I've got something for a fill light. This is what's going to be controlling my shadows in the image. Sometimes it's a big umbrella back here. Other times I'll just take a light and I'll bounce it off the room just to kind of lighten the shadows of everything. And then a lot of times what I'll do, I'm not usually one for a rim light. I'll usually throw a little splash of light on the background for separation. This is just kind of helping to create a little bit of form. Now, if you're familiar with the pen portrait, I talked about the checkerboard lighting. So it's going light, dark, light, dark. So basically what that means is, let's say the light's coming from this side over here on camera right. This is going to be dark. Then this is going to be light. Then his face goes dark. And then this needs to be light over here. Okay. You can sometimes do this if you really want to sit there and refine it a lot with your main light. This can kind of rake across and you can basically like find the edge of it. It's a little hard in here with all the lights being on, but you can kind of create that effect. It almost looks like the light's going in 2 different directions. You can do it with one light. It's a pain, but you can. I oftentimes find what I will regularly do is I'll just throw an extra light back on there to create that effect. And it just helps me to control it a little bit more. For that, I'm going to use one of these. I've got one more light on a small stand, okay? And in an ideal world, I'd probably have an extra, even an extra foot probably makes a little bit of a difference. So I'm going to move this just a hair back, just a tiny, tiny bit back. This makes all the difference in the world. And on this light, you can see that it's going kind of everywhere, right? So my go-to for this, more often than not, is I use a grid on a zoom reflector. They make these for a great number of different types of modifiers. The grid's just going to be restricting the light. This is a 10-degree grid, so it's a pretty tight beam of light. They make all different degrees for these, 10, 20, 30, so you can get kind of different size spreads. It's just basically, this is in here, a little honeycomb thing. You can kind of see it's almost like tiny little tunnels. This won't change the quality of light. So this is a hard light source. It's going to be a hard light source. It's just going to take it from this big thing to that. The bigger the degree, the bigger the beam. So this is 10. This is pretty small. It's usually 5, 10, 20. But if you need this to be a little bit bigger, just back it out a little bit, okay? And you can kind of see I'm not getting any light here. So it's just control, okay? I'll give you a technical and a practical thing when it comes to how bright should this be. Different surfaces reflect light differently. Different brightnesses reflect light differently. Technically, if you'd like to measure this, you need a reflected light meter, which is a different mode on one of these, and you measure the light bouncing off the surface. You can also measure the light at the exposure by just metering it there at the wall, but it's always going to be different because materials are different, colors, reflections, so forth and so on. So you have to use a reflected light meter. That's a whole other thing. More often than not, I eye this. I just find that it's a little bit faster in practical application. So I'm going to stick this right here, and I'm just going to raise and lower it until I'm happy. It's on C. I also like the modeling light here because I can move around and I know exactly what it's going to look like. So for example, if I go here, I know kind of where it's going to be positioned. Right? And if I want to make it brighter, I'm going to turn it up, let's say 2 stops. I can make it brighter, right? If I want to make it somewhere in between, I'm going to turn it down a stop, maybe I'll back it out a little bit just to spread that out a little more. You'll notice that I was kind of shooting from a little bit of a higher angle just because I had it angled a little low. So let's just raise it up a little bit based on how I want to shoot it. But it's not spilling onto the face, right? Which is great. So now I can go a little lower with my background. Cool. Really beautiful separation. And if you were to see this in a pure black and white, all I've got is a little punch of contrast here. I think it can go back a little bit brighter where it was. I still think once we see it in black and white. Yeah, it's actually purple in person. It's just showing up blue. Yeah, probably a little bit. But you can kind of see how we're getting into that dark light, right? That's the checkerboard. This is kind of your pen-ish version of that window. Ish, right? What's that? Sure.
Melanie's saying she notices that the camera's a little above the model. When do you shoot from above, and when do you shoot at eye level or below?
Not really a right or wrong for that. I think a lot of times with portrait work, I tend to favor a more creative approach in terms of angle and lens versus something being straightforward. Like with a headshot, for example, which is fundamentally this, right? He is the center of this, trying to make it look good and flattering. And a lot of times the choices we make in a lens or light is to kind of be invisible, right? The lens choice being long or close to how we see distortion, or the perspective, maybe just finding that right angle of flattering balance. And that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of times if you, like, especially if you look at the pen work, sometimes he'd shoot it a little wide, he'd get a little low for a hero shot, or a little high to put more contact to the eyes. And so it really depends on what you want to project in your subject. Do you want to shoot them low to make them feel powerful? Do you want to shoot them a little high where I feel like it connects more on the eyes? It's really all about preference and projection. So for example, you can look up those. That was nice. So if I wanted to kind of shoot him this way and go for a more traditional hero angle, this is eyes. This makes me feel very differently. And it's not that one is right or wrong, it's just about the opinion, right? Another thing that I regularly like to do is I like to shoot with something that's just a little bit wider than you probably are used to doing. This is a 55mm lens, so about a 40-42 on a full frame. And as an environmental portrait, that feels usually pretty mid or you know, relatively balanced. But when you get really close with it, it's fine. You can look up that way. That was nice. You can create something a little more dynamic, which I like. It's got a little bit of a distortion to it, but I'm kind of into it, right? So fundamentally, these two aren't that different, like in terms of his pose and it being a low angle, but I think something with that wider lens, when you get close to it, really makes you feel involved and close and almost uncomfortably close. And I think that's kind of one of my favorite things about portraiture is that it lets you, it almost acts as a shield to be able to get closer than we're often getting with people in normal interactions. I think that becomes kind of interesting. It's a real like entering of a personal space, and I think it lets us psychologically feel closer and more intimate with the subject. I think that's a very, very cool thing. So there's a lot I could kind of play around with here. So for example, can we do the cool teacher shot here really quick?
Of course.
Great. So I do like, often I regularly use a posing table so that I can bring hands in, right? When that is not, when you don't have one around, back of a chair works really well. And so try this for me. Yeah, let's throw that on. And let's roll the sleeves up too. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody loves a rolled sleeve.
Now it's an after-school program. Look at this.
Mhm.
All right.
Smoking's bad.
Hello, fellow kids. Drinking and driving's bad.
Great. Cool. Awesome. Let's turn you a little bit more. Yep. Great. Cool. And then since he lowered, I'm going to lower this down a little bit. Cool. And then what you can kind of do here is just kind of lean across and maybe almost don't like hand here, but it's almost like you can bring it a little lower and you're going to bring it next to the face, but not press into it. So it's almost like a here. Bring the head up just a little bit. Turn your face out that way a little bit more. Good. Furrow the brow a little bit for me. Open the mouth just a little bit. And then just your eye, look at me. Okay. And so like, I think this starts to do something really fun. Right? Now, I think because I'm using the wider lens, it makes my spot look a little smaller. So I'm going to back this up a little bit. And I do think my shadow is a little dark for my taste. Okay. So let's make this a little taller. Put it because since I'm shooting it a little low, I'm just going to make it that right there. Let's try that again. And then
Mimic what we just did.
oh, that's great. Don't worry. So even though like I'm not including a table, like you kind of get a sense that there's one there. I think it works, right? But I think the shadows are a little dark. Now I could do this in post, like you can, but we have a light, so let's do it here. I'm gonna just take this light. I'm gonna bounce it off the room, okay? Just to lighten everything up a little bit. This is on B, so I keep this separate. I'm just going to take a test fire on it just to see. It's pretty dark still. Wow. Yeah, I know. I was hoping it would. I was at 7. I thought it would do something. Turn that up about 2.5 stops. Still nothing, huh? I know, but there's not enough space, man. What do you want from me? It'll reach, yeah.
Put a zoom reflector.
Yeah, I mean it's lightening up a little bit, but honestly, I for it being at the end of the power, it's just we're bouncing it off black, which is pretty much the worst case scenario. It is. I was learning a little bit, but not really enough. Hopefully, directionally that works. Let's just see. A little bit. It's just down a little. So I'm just basically trying to lighten up a little bit of the overall shadows. Let's see.
Bounce off the projections.
Let's see. We were about here. Got it to here. Like it's definitely a little brighter. It's kind of brightening up my main a little bit more than I'd have liked, but
If I can move this way, move this over, you'll get more on it.
it's fine. Let's kind of do something like that. I'll play with it in the dynamic range a little bit. Okay. So I think like this is a really nice starting point for fundamentally the 3-light setup, right? If I wanted to make that a little bigger, spread a little more, could use a like a 20, 30 degree grid. I could also take the reflector off. I think this is fine. I think this works. And so now that I have something like this, I'm actually going to turn my main light down a hair. Now that I have something like this, I can move. It's actually pretty forgiving. So I don't want to be afraid of shadows. So I'll move around. He can move around. And sometimes you'll get these less traditional lighting patterns that I think lend themselves to a more interesting image. And so I'd want to like work with him to try to find different expressions and kind of different micro pose of the face, and then always be quick, because sometimes it's the in-between shot that is the interesting thing. And then just kind of don't be afraid to, get up in there, right? And you'll get some really cool, nice stuff like this. That's great. Yep, I'll look off right here. And just at me. And so I kind of I bounce around, right? And lift that up. Yeah, that's good. Lift that up a little bit. Good. Open the mouth just a little bit for me. Good. Good. And kind of like try that. There's the sniff the knuckles thing. Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. And then bring it down a little lower off the face. Good. And look up this way for me. Good. And a little more serious. There we go. Cool. And so you can kind of see like I'm bouncing around, right? Give him a second to come in. Cool, right? Just out of curiosity, let's see what this spread works. Man, this is a little bit. Who'd you get this from? I know, I can say.
I bought it off of Joe McNally, so odds are it's been through a war.
Also, when it gets hot.
Yeah. They get ovalized, and then the round doesn't fit in the oval, and then this happens. So it survived me and Joe. Okay.
I'm going to turn it down a little bit because this does tend to kill a little bit of light. Let's just see if I want this to be a little bigger, what that's going to look like.
So question in the chat, is the camera set to monochrome or is capture one?
I have capture doing the desaturation. So it was just spilling a little bit and getting a little on his face. So you can kind of see it lift up a little bit there, spilling, hence the grid, but that looks a little better there. Cool. Great. And there's your negative space. Cool. And so there's a lot of play you can have with this. It's incredibly flexible going left or right with kind of whatever you're after. But I think like there's some really, really cool, interesting, like this is what I mean when I say that it's close. It's almost like uncomfortably close, but I'm into it. I think it's very, very cool. And like you get this kind of stuff, which is really fun. Just good personality character portraits. And it feels like you're kind of almost, he's telling a story. You're in the middle of a conversation. And you're just kind of right there. That's kind of what I like about it. It feels like a visual conversation. Questions? How are we doing?
All right. You guys all right? No one's got a question.
No one's got questions?
He's this amazing. All right, pop quiz. No, I was kidding.
No? All right. You can also do a lot here, like with color. So I think this really works nicely in black and white. But for those of you that are kind of curious about it, you know, you can definitely do something color-wise in here that totally works too. So cool. Yeah, cool. Cool. Okay. All right. So sometimes I want to make life intentionally more challenging. And this is where I start to introduce.
Someone's asking.
Great, I love it.
Why are desaturating? Is it see the balance of light and shadow better? Like why people black and white?
I mean, it's two reasons. Yeah, I think it's easier to see tonality better in black and white, but I know that there's always the argument about color in black and white, and I know that color oftentimes gets pointed to be antiquated or out of date, and color feels more modern. I understand that. But I think getting into the does this image work better in black and white's the wrong approach. If I'm shooting black and white, it's usually with intention. If I'm shooting color, it's with intention. There should be a reason for each choice. And so here, when it's black and white, you notice that I change the power of the background exposure because the exposure was different when it went into black and white. And so I'm thinking about tone and contrast more when it's a black and white image. It's all about deliberate choices. And when I first started getting into photography, the first images that I ever fell in love with were black and white images. And so they've always really resonated more with me than color. I think sometimes people use black and white as a crutch, but I think it can be really, really beautiful when it's done correctly. I compare it to like cooking or music. It's, you know, there's something to be said for a really elaborate, complicated, unusual dish where you're doing all kinds of new and creative, complicated things. There's also something to be said for roasting a chicken really well. It's easy to cook chicken. It's hard to do it really well. Or it's using color when it's done well is like an orchestra. But I also really love the pianist sitting alone by themselves. Sometimes that has more of an emotional resonance to me. And so I think it's not about one being current or antiquated. I think it's really more about intent and feeling and what you want to achieve with the images. And so the black and white isn't so much a technical thing as it is like a stripping down all of the extra stuff and just kind of getting to the core of what you're going after. And I kind of like the romanticism that black and white affords the image a little bit.
Lou in the chat's asking, how about using a reflector to add light on the left?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my choice for adding the fill light into the room. You definitely could do that. If you favor a more well-lit image, by all means. I also sometimes really loves me a deep, dark shadow. And so, you know, if that's what you're into, go for it.
And then someone else is asking, what is your go-to method for avoiding unwanted shadows in a compact setup?
Shadows in what way? Like on a background?
You're asking me like it's my question. I don't know.
So a lot of times it's position of light to the camera or quality of light. So a hard shadow is going to create more of a shadow. A hard light's going to create more of a shadow. Or if you're really close to the subject and you see it, If you're really close to your subject is close to the background, sometimes that will cast a shadow. So you can kind of see that I've got a little bit of an angle on it. That can help kind of create more distance between the two to kind of hide that shadow, or how you frame it or angle yourself. All of those things kind of can help you shoot around it. Yes.
I noticed you only metered once.
Sure. So he said that he noticed I only metered once. How important is it to use a meter? So I am a big fan of learning with the meter. I will be totally honest. A lot of times I don't use a meter. Sometimes I do. Depends on what I need it for. So if I need to create something quickly and it's really about speed, I walk in with a meter and I go, this is what I'm going to do. Boom, 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 boom. And I can actually set the whole thing up without taking a picture. Other times, I kind of want to go in and paint it a little bit. I'm like, a little light here, a little light here, a little light here, a little light here, right? And I'm doing it a little more by feel. If you are trying to repeat and you're trying to learn, I think understanding the meter and understanding measurements of light is really, really helpful. Because you're like, all right, I'm watching somebody bake a cake. And if you watch a video of somebody baking a cake and they never tell you, you're like, okay, there's flour and sugar, and so, but they never tell you how much, it's hard for you to duplicate it, right? The meter is what helps you measure it. It helps you know how much, which is why I said in the beginning, I go, okay, it started with a 4, but I'm going to intentionally bump it up half of a stop, full stop, right? And you learn those tricks. But it's hard to learn that by eye. It's helpful if you learn it with a measurement. Second time I use it is if I have to duplicate something. So sometimes I'm doing a pre-light day and I have to go in and I set the whole thing up. And then I have to measure it, break it all down, and then set it up the next day. Helps me measure the light, right? Or if I'm doing an advertisement where I'm shooting 2 different people and they have to be comped together, but it's got to look like the same light, even though it's in 2 different spaces on 2 different days. I got to measure it, right? Otherwise, you can never repeat the exact same setup. So if you've got something that you use on a regular basis, or you want to repeat something, meter is indispensable, right? But what is at the core of whenever I'm moving lights around is measurement of light. Because once you use a meter a lot, once you get really comfortable with exposure, you go, okay, I know what a stop's going to look like. I know what 2 stops going to look like. I know what half stop's going to look like. When I'm changing my light, I'm changing it with those things in my head. But it's only because you kind of learn how measurements of light look visually. And that's just the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So do you need it at the digital age? No. Does it make it easier in some capacity for certain things? Absolutely. Is it necessary in certain types of work? Absolutely. I also think it's really good in learning. But, you know, everybody is, like when I first started, I'm like flipping lights on, I'm turning it up and down. And then when I got a meter, I got better at it. So, you know, that's always the trade-off. But I'm a fan. Cool. Yes.
Light setup, would you consider it more a masculine light, or you think you could shoot a woman the same way?
I've used it for both. It depends on the person. So he said, is it a masculine setup? Would you use it for men and women? I use it for both all the time. It's more about how I want to portray the person than anything else. If I want to create a really glowy, flattering light, then I'm going to have a much brighter fill light, right? If I want more texture to the face, I might show more shadow. I think some people get too obsessed with the idea of needing to not show age or wrinkles. And I don't feel that way. I love texture on the face. I love the character. I love the story, the history. I love all of those things. I don't think it's necessarily something to be afraid of. One of my favorite quotes, it was an Henri Cartier-Bresson quote, and he said, he goes, I think at some age you get the face you deserve. I always like that idea. You get the face you deserve. I think that's a great quote. But I also like that's the person, you know? And so it's not really about it being masculine or feminine. It's more about how you choose to show the subject, flattering or not. or, you know, light and bright or not. It totally depends on what you're after.
I completely agree. Texture and loving it.
Yeah.
But the person, a lot of times, the older woman that you're taking up.
So that's a different question. So that gets to intent. So he had said that sometimes certain people want to look more even. They want Photoshop, right? So it comes to the why you're making the portrait. Are you pleasing yourself? Are you pleasing the sitter? Or are you pleasing someone else? If you are pleasing the sitter because they hired you, I'd do whatever you want me to do. You want more light? Sure. Fine. But it's all about intent. Still, it's like, how do you want to show them? Who's the boss? Sometimes you're not the boss. You know? This is what it is, you know? Yeah, pride of service, exactly. So if that's what they want, I give you what you want. It's fine. Yeah. All right. I'm going to show you one other cool thing. So every once in a while, I want to make a more complicated light. Can I get another battery for this? This is, oh, never mind. It's working. It was showing 0 and then it turned back on. Okay. So back in the day, and I mean like long time ago, when they were using continuous lights a lot more than strobes, there were a great number of types of continuous lights, and you'll still see some of these pop up in film and TV every once in a while. The Mole Richardsons have a pretty wide range of different types of stuff. I love shooting with those, the Fresnels and all those sorts of things. They had this one light that was really unique. It was called a scoop. It kind of looked like this a little bit, but it was a bit deeper, kind of more of like a telezoom reflector, if you're ever familiar with those. And it had a very smooth interior, and it was pretty big. And the light inside of it was a long tube. It's important because of how it filled the dish. It filled the dish, which was silver in a way that was just this really, it was a hard light, but it was smooth and polished. It was just this really beautifully unique quality of light. And I always loved that quality of light. You'd see it in a lot of, you know, if you go back and look at Karsh's work and Penn to a degree, you'd see the use of these lights. And so they're very hot to be in front of. They're big, they're unwieldy. And so I was looking for a way that I could find a similar look to it with strobes. And so I basically figured out a couple of different solutions. I would start with a Magnum light, which is just this, just a big reflector. This is a white dish, so it's going to soften it up a little bit. And what I would do is I would put like a beauty dish sock over the end just to alleviate the harshness a little bit. Still hard, still a relatively small light source, but just a little bit softer. The white helps to alleviate that a little bit. And if I stagger something like this with a larger light source, I can kind of get some of the characteristics of each. The benefit of the grid, just like there, is it's going to give me a little bit more of a concentrated beam. So yeah. Yeah, there's a black grid and a white grid. My understanding of the two, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the white grid is going to slightly soften the quality of light a little bit. Is that kind of its intention a little?
The white grid softens the edge of the light.
Yeah.
So it's not creating such a definition. So it's got a certain subtle
Softer
bleed.
gradation of hard
Right.
fall off. Yeah. Yeah. And so it just gives you a little bit more of a directionality on this. I'll kind of show you. Let me flip off the modeling light here, what it's doing. Can you flip the overheads off for just a second? Is that okay? Just so we can see it. Sure. Okay. So I'll show you just the dish. Okay, right? It's, if you can kind of see by the edge, it's hard, but it's not super crisp. There's just a little softness to it, which is nice, which I like. But if I throw this on it, you can see that it's across the whole background. This creates a much tighter beam of light, right? So you get what is effectively a hard-ish quality, right? The size of it makes it a little softer, and the grid restricts it back down. So it's like you're making it big to make it a little smaller in spread, right? So it's an interesting, like, kind of mix of characteristics. Now, by default, if I were to just use this alone, let's actually test my exposure here. It's fine. Let's just see. So it's giving me 5, 6, 8. So I'm going to turn it down a stop and an 8. Okay. And so this is it by, let me turn the other ones off so you can kind of see what it's doing by itself. I'll turn everything else off. That's where the light's going. It's a tiny bit. Okay. Now what's cool about this is you can kind of see there's a little bit of specularity to it. I'm going to turn it up just a hair, maybe like, I don't know, a third or a fourth stop of light, just a tiny bit. I'm just putting a tiny little pocket of light on the face. Okay. I could actually do something really cool with this. I could throw the background light on. I could put a little bit more fill into it. I could actually turn this into something kind of interesting and cool if I wanted to. And I really don't hate the quality of light on him. I think it's pretty nice. Okay. But watch what happens when I turn everything back on. You're going to notice a couple of different things. So I had this exposed at about 4.5 on an f4 exposure. I think I had this at about a 5, 6, so about a stop overexposed. And so when you add something that's already exposed, you're actually going to get an even more overexposed. So overall, it's a little bright. So to get some of that, because they're kind of, this is washing out that hardness specularity that I had. So I don't actually want to keep this as my main light. Instead, I'm actually going to turn it down, maybe about a stop or so, to offset the difference. Because I want this to show up a little bit more, and I want this to show up a little bit less. I'll bring it down even more, I think. Say another half a stop. And so the more I turn this up and the more I turn this down, you're going to kind of mix and match some of these characteristics, which I think is pretty cool. I'll turn this back one more time. Cool. I'm just going to turn it a little more to the side. Just give it a little more drama. And so I'm kind of mixing and matching these little things.
I'm sorry, I keep looking at you. Like resetting.
Turn it down just a little bit more. I'm just kind of finessing and balancing it a little bit. The more I turn my main soft light down, the harder the characteristics are going to be. And you can kind of see the lights shifted a little bit more to the front from where we started, which was kind of more to the right side, right? Something kind of there. Versus this is putting it a little more to the front. You can kind of see this is the more powerful light, right? Cool. It's pretty close, which makes it a little softer, but you're still going to get kind of that punchy specularity that I think is pretty cool. So I'm going to bring it around a little bit just so I can put a little more sparkle in the eyes. And then we'll let that be kind of the shift to the side. And this is how I start to create kind of that more complex lighting, which I think looks really pretty. Cool, cool, cool. I'm going to bring it down a little bit. Nice. Yeah. So you get that little sparkle kind of in the eyes right there. Like that. And let's just see, just out of curiosity, we turn off the main light. What's that doing? What's that look like? Yeah, see that's without, and that's with. Kind of see that little layering that it's bringing in? Just a little. Turn it up just a hair. that way. Just turn it up a little bit. And I'm now going to shoot it a little more to the side. Cool. I'm going to flip that modeling light on so I can see it a little more. Cool, great. You don't happen to have a flag, do you? I don't know, I just want to put a little shadow on the side. Or cinefoil. Can I put cinefoil? Great. I'm gonna.
I don't know how big this is.
That's great. That's fine. So that's perfect. So at the moment, looks great. So this is really nice. I upped the power just a little bit on that main, but that's great. Put the eyes right where they were. Perfect. That was good. Very pensive. I'm going to put a little shadow on the face from that main light. Sorry, the harder light. It's going to give me a little bit of that shadow. Cool. Just cast a little bit of a shadow. And then let's make that go a little brighter. What's that?
Just check out of the way.
Ah, that's fine. Just casting a little bit of an intentional shadow. Cool. That's great right there.
That's cool.
And then drop that hand for me. Nice. Yeah.
Someone in the chat is asking, would you get a similar effect if you remove the baffle of diffusion from the softbox? So I'm guessing they're saying
No, it's different. The Magnum's going to be a little punchier, which is still kind of my preference. But that's nice right there. It's hardish. It's a fun quality of light. A little bit, just with your eyes. There you go, right there. But it is a little different than just your eyes. It make good. Cool. And then if I come this way, go here. Cool. Yeah, I think we got some really, really beautiful stuff. I think this all looks really nice. And kind of once you have it, it really just boils down to kind of how you want to play. And that's it, you know. I'm going to move this a little closer to the background. And I'll just sit there and I'll kind of tweak some things and move them around and, you know, see what works. That's good right there. Perfect. And then just your eyes at me. Great. Cool. Super cool. Cool. Yeah, that's kind of it. Yeah. I know. It's professionally good looking. The thing is like with this kind of stuff, oftentimes you're given sometimes a minute or two. You come in, you knock this out, and you kind of come in with something of a safety approach, and you just kind of like having 20 minutes of this is way more than I would ever need to kind of run through this. Come in, you kind of just hang out and talk to the person, and that really becomes a big part of it. Yeah, but you know, you can kind of see there's a ton of flexibility kind of within the space and adding in some shadows, taking it away. You can kind of do all kinds of cool things. How do you want to, you know, draw personality of the sitter? And that's kind of it. Yeah. Super, super cool. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Any other last couple of questions we've got?
How about a hand for Justin for just sitting there?
Oh, I broke a sweat. Oh.
He's doing the Lord's work today. Yeah. Cool.
He had to bring a shirt. I mean,
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
you guys are good. No questions?
Anybody have any other questions?
All right, cool. I want to thank Chris for coming through. I want to thank Justin for sitting down. I want to thank you guys
Good
for
job.
showing up.
Thanks. Good sit.
If you're watching this on playback, hit like, smash, subscribe, and there's plenty of classes, including another one from this guy from a little while ago. So you can check out more Chris on this channel. Thank you guys for coming out. We appreciate you, and enjoy the rest of your day, guys. Thanks so
tuning
much.
in. Thank you.